not an acupuncturist, but a physician out there that said he was giving him acupuncture, and he was injecting him.
The King's passing was officially ruled a heart attack. At about 100 years old, Presley's doctor broke his silence on his true cause of passing, and his shocking claims will rewrite everything we thought we knew about the King of Rock and Roll's final moments. From hidden health conditions to allegations of cover-ups and conspiracies, join us as we unveil every detail. One story that changed everything. For decades, people believed that Elvis Presley passed on just the same way many stars do. Too much fame, too much usage, and too little peace. That was the version we were all told. But according to one man who was there in Elvis's final hours, that story is only half true. Dr. George Nichopoulos, better known as Dr. Nick, was Elvis's longtime personal doctor. And in the year 2007, he finally spoke out. No more hiding, no more media rumors, just the truth. Although years later, Dr. Nick himself also passed away in the year 2016. He was 88 years old at the time and slowly approaching his 100th birthday. But before his demise, he had one more story to tell, one that just might change everything people thought they knew about the King of Rock and Roll. The interview with Andrew Hearn in 2007 was calm, emotional, and filled with memories that had been buried for decades. It was the first time Dr. Nick truly opened up about what happened at Graceland on August 16, 1977, the day Elvis passed on. And what did he share? It was nothing like the rumors. The friendship between Dr. Nick and Elvis didn't start with fame or music. It began out of need, as Dr. Nick wasn't just handing out medicine. He became part of the inner circle. He traveled with Elvis on tours, stayed by his side during shows, and even cared for Elvis's staff and family members. He saw everything, the highs, the lows, and the personal pain. Elvis was not lazy, Dr. Nick said in the interview. He was struggling, really struggling. On stage, Elvis looked perfect, with bright jumpsuits, good hair, and that powerful voice. But behind the scenes, it was a different story. The crowds never saw the tired eyes, the swollen stomach, the pain in his joints, and the way Elvis had to struggle to keep standing night after night. Life on the road was wild. One night in Detroit, the next is in Chicago, the next is in St. Louis, then Las Vegas, then back home. The man barely had time to eat properly, let alone rest. He was living on catnaps, peanut butter, and stress, Dr. Nick said with a sigh. There were nights when Elvis didn't sleep at all. Jet lag was constant, meals were irregular, and the pressure to be perfect on stage never let up. The world wanted more Elvis, and they wanted it all the time. But what no one wanted to talk about was what was happening inside Elvis's body. Dr. Nick revealed that Elvis had a condition called megacolon. It sounds strange, but it was very serious. Elvis's large intestine had become stretched and weak. This meant he had trouble passing waste like normal people do. That kind of backup puts dangerous pressure on the body, especially the heart. Elvis wasn't just bloated, Dr. Nick said. He was in pain almost every day. And yet Elvis kept performing. He kept smiling. He kept saying thank you very much to screaming fans while secretly suffering in silence. The treatments were meant to help him sleep, help with pain, and help with his digestion. But the truth was they weren't enough. Dr. Nick almost made it to 100, but even before that milestone, he gave us something greater, a second look at history through the eyes of someone who lived it. And finally, after years of silence, he let the world see Elvis, not as a legend, but as a man. Dr. Nick finally reveals the night Elvis passed away. He talks about the treatments given to Elvis. The road was not just a stage for Elvis Presley. In the beginning, it was part of the dream. Bright lights, cheering fans, and music that seemed to move the world. Elvis was never lazy. He was full of fire and energy. But by the time he entered his 40s, both were running low. Touring became harder. He still loved singing, but the travel, the pressure, the long nights, it was all too much. And fans had no idea. On stage, he smiled. Backstage, he was hurting. Most celebrities struggle to stay healthy, especially when they're always on the move. Elvis was no different. Dr. Nick tried to manage his health and watched him fall apart piece by piece. The sad part, even with doctors around him, even with money and care, Elvis could not escape the toll of his lifestyle. Elvis suffered more than people knew. He battled anxiety, sleeplessness, while still trying so hard to keep up the Elvis image that the real man underneath was slowly breaking. And around him, people protected the legend. No one wanted to admit the truth. By the last years of his life, Elvis was showing signs. He was slower, sometimes confused. The sharpness he once had started to fade. Every performance turned into a battle. He wasn't just entertaining anymore. He was pushing against exhaustion, against illness, against time. The very machine that made him famous was now draining the life out of him. And then came that awful day. On the night of August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was found unresponsive on the floor of his bathroom at Graceland. His fiancée, Ginger Alden, discovered him, called for help, but it was too late. The panic was real. Help came fast. But by 3:30 in the afternoon, he was declared gone at Baptist Memorial Hospital. He was only 42 years old. People gathered outside Graceland in shock. At first, people were told it was a heart attack, but it didn't take long for more details to come out. Toxicology reports showed high levels of prescriptions in his system, given to him by doctors, but too many for too long did serious damage. Dr. Nick was heartbroken. He had tried, really tried. Their story went way back. It was around 1967 when Dr. Nick first met Elvis. George Klein's girlfriend worked in the doctor's office and called him one Sunday. Elvis had been riding horses at Circle G Ranch and got sore from the saddle. Dr. Nick made the trip not to Graceland but to the ranch, and not just once. Elvis asked him to come back again, then again. In one day, Dr. Nick went to the ranch 3 times. Why? Elvis kept saying he forgot something, but it wasn't about health. It was about the company. He just liked talking to new people. He wanted a fresh voice in the room. Dr. Nick came in, calm and professional. He wasn't starstruck or looking for a photo. He just wanted to help. And Elvis noticed, as he was used to people treating him like some kind of god. Most people were too nervous to talk to him like a normal man. But Dr. Nick didn't care about fame. He didn't see the superstar. He saw a tired man who needed real help. That first visit was supposed to be quick. Instead, it turned into hours of talking. They spoke about health, bad habits, sleepless nights, and the toll the road was taking on Elvis. That one honest conversation built a strong connection. Elvis got tired of the same crowd. He liked conversations, deep ones. He loved books and brought lockers full of them on tour. Sometimes he didn't read them, but he liked having them near. That tells you a lot. Later, when Elvis started touring again, he asked Dr. Nick to come along. That was a big decision, and that meant everything changed. The doctor was unsure. He had a medical practice and plans. He knew if he joined the tour, everything would change, but in the end, he said yes. Here's the twist. Dr. Nick was never on Elvis's payroll. Not once. Instead, they made a deal. They would calculate what the doctor might have made if he stayed at his clinic for 2 or 3 weeks. Elvis would pay that amount, and Dr. Nick would give it to the other doctors back home. Fair enough. Dr. Nick wasn't just there for Elvis. He was in charge of over 150 people on tour, and he had to treat all kinds of issues: flu, stomach problems, infections, even serious cases like dialysis for Felton Jarvis, one of the crew who had kidney issues. Everyone on that tour lived at night. They slept in the day. That made things tough for Dr. Nick. He had to be awake when they were, and then try to go back to normal life when the tour ended. He didn't get much rest. Even when they were not on tour, Dr. Nick saw Elvis 5 or 6 times a week. He would stop by Graceland almost every evening, sometimes just to talk. Elvis needed someone to listen. By the time the mid-70s rolled in, Elvis was deep in health problems. He took treatment for energy, for sleep, for nerves. They kept him going, but they also hurt him. He still had that voice, still sang his heart out, but his body could not keep up. He sweated heavily on stage, sometimes forget words, and other times he would lean on the piano for support. He wasn't lazy. He was fighting every second. He tried to fire Dr. Nick sometimes, got mad, got frustrated, but Dr. Nick never left. He used to say, "You can't fire me, I don't work for you." That honesty built trust between them. Dr. Nick never stopped trying. He stayed, he listened, he adjusted treatments. But in the end, no medical help could fix the real problem. This brings us to some health secrets that Elvis was involved in. The health secrets that Elvis Presley got involved with. He talks about a Presley's health struggles. One of the strangest treatments Elvis ever went through happened in Las Vegas. Doctors there had an unusual idea to help him lose weight. They put him to sleep for 3 weeks straight, only waking him up to sip liquids. The plan was simple. If he didn't eat, the weight would drop. But that didn't happen. After sleeping almost an entire month, he came out heavier, gaining 10 full pounds. It became clear this so-called solution was just another failed attempt. What most fans didn't realize was that Elvis's weight problems weren't just about food or laziness. According to Dr. Nick, Elvis had a very rare and serious condition from birth. He was born without the right nerve supply in parts of his colon and small intestine. That meant his body couldn't move waste properly through the digestive system. This caused major problems as the years went on. The colon, instead of pushing waste out, just grew larger and larger. It stretched beyond normal size because everything was backed up. At the time of his post-mortem, doctors discovered how massive it had become. Elvis himself used to ask if a part of it could be removed. He hoped that surgery might solve the issue, but no doctor dared to do it. In the 70s, that kind of operation was considered risky, especially on a famous figure. They feared failure and what it might cost them. If this same issue happened today, doctors wouldn't even hesitate. Medical tools and knowledge have improved so much that the surgery would be routine. But back then, the fear of making a mistake on someone like Elvis stopped them from trying. So the problem stayed and got worse. When waste stays stuck inside the body for too long, it becomes toxic. The bacteria can build up and poison the blood. That's what Elvis was dealing with. It wasn't just a stomach ache or bloating, it was dangerous, and it affected every part of his life, from how he looked to how he felt, even how he performed. That wasn't the only battle he was fighting. The other challenge came in the form of treatment. Some were for sleeping, while others were for pain, muscle, and anxiety. It was a long list, and most people had no idea just how many he was taking daily. Dr. Nick often defended Elvis by explaining that most of the substances were prescribed with care, but when a person is battling multiple health issues and is under constant stress, the treatments stack up. They don't always work well together, the body gets weaker, organs become overloaded, and symptoms start to show. People close to Elvis saw the changes. His face began to swell, his energy dropped, he started gaining weight rapidly. Elvis never liked disappointing people. If a show was scheduled, he wanted to be there no matter how he felt. Even when his legs were weak or his head wasn't clear, he made sure he stood in front of that microphone. He believed that was his duty, to sing, to entertain, to smile. On top of that, he also had other medical issues. He suffered from high blood pressure. His liver was under stress. He had glaucoma, a condition that can damage the eyes. These problems didn't go away, and when combined with the effects of long-term treatments, they made his situation more serious. The sad part was that Elvis didn't keep secrets. He asked questions, he wanted help, but each time the answer was the same. Too risky, too complex, not worth trying. Even with all this going on, many assumed his problems came from substance use or bad habits, but they never took the time to look deeper. His health issues were real. They weren't caused by partying or poor choices. They were rooted in his body from the very beginning. Dr. Nick was often caught in the middle. He became more than a doctor. He became a friend, a counselor, and at times, a lifeline. But one time they had an argument that almost ended their friendship. Let's get into the details. A brief argument with the king. He narrates his arguments with Elvis. One night, Dr. Nick found himself cut off from Elvis after an argument. Elvis was angry, shouting words he couldn't take back. They parted ways. Then came the fallout. Elvis ended up in Vegas or Palm Springs and got his hands on some heavy stuff. According to Dr. Nick, this wasn't his usual routine. But whatever Elvis had taken, it was strong enough to knock him off balance. A different doctor had stepped in for the tour and gave Elvis a powerful treatment that dropped his blood pressure. The effects could last a few hours or even an entire day. Elvis would step on stage still feeling half asleep, moving slowly. He couldn't remember lyrics, couldn't perform well, and fans started noticing. The situation got so bad that even Colonel Parker, who rarely dealt directly with Dr. Nick, called and begged him to return. Dr. Nick didn't agree at first, but when Elvis himself called to apologize, things changed. Dr. Nick came back and quickly figured out the root of the problem, and once it was removed from the picture, Elvis bounced back. It was one of the few times when the problem had a clear cause and solution. But the damage to the shows and Elvis's image had already begun to show. Back at home, Dr. Nick tried a different method. He refused to leave any treatment lying around. Instead, he moved a nurse into Graceland under the excuse that she was there for Elvis's grandmother. The real reason? So Elvis wouldn't have direct access to his usage. Everything had to go through her. It worked, but only to a point. Elvis didn't like being treated like a child, but Dr. Nick believed it was the only way. One day, while checking the bathroom, Dr. Nick found 3 massive bottles of treatment, 1,000 in each. He threw them all down the toilet. Elvis was extremely angry, but the doctor stood firm. "Imagine treating a grown man like a kid," Dr. Nick said, but someone had to do it. Elvis had what some would call a personality linked to habits, and it wasn't that he wanted to be that way. He just liked the feeling of relief. There was a time he returned from California almost lifeless. Another doctor had given him multiple treatments and his body couldn't handle it. He went straight from the plane to the hospital, and Dr. Nick had to detox him fast. Some wondered why Elvis wasn't admitted more often. Dr. Nick admitted him several times. And while the term polypharmacy sounded alarming, he argued that many people with chronic conditions take just as many usages. It wasn't about the number, but how they were used. There was also a rumor that Elvis kept increasing his intake because he was building resistance. Dr. Nick pushed back on that. He explained that during tours, Elvis might take more because shows mattered deeply to him. But once back home, he could go days without anything. If he were truly into these habits, he wouldn't have been able to stop that easily. Was Elvis in control? Not exactly. According to Dr. Nick, the team controlled it. When someone is this way, they lose control. Dr. Nick tried to get Elvis into a clinic, but back then, options were limited. He found only one in Arkansas, and even that wasn't ideal. They were working with the best they had. Before and after shows, there were always treatments involved, but it wasn't for fun. Elvis had arthritis. His back and neck were bad. Certain moves on stage, especially his karate kicks and sudden twists, left him in serious pain. Every performance was like a sports event. He needed medical care like any athlete would. Dr. Nick swore that everything he prescribed had a reason, except for the placebos. Yes, placebos. Sometimes the best way to help Elvis was to give him something harmless. Dr. Nick would open a capsule, pour out the medicine, and replace it with sugar or salt. This way, Elvis felt treated, but without the risk of real contents he was expecting. This wasn't all. Nick further talked about the racquetball business. Dr. Nick shared that Elvis never invested money up front. He just let them use his name. But trouble started when someone in Palm Springs learned that one of the men running the company had taken money and gotten himself a car. Elvis found out and thought of the others, including Dr. Nick, were in on it. Vernon, Elvis's father, got upset and told him to pull out of the deal. Later, Elvis did help cover some final costs, around $100,000, but that was only because of the mess that came from him stepping out suddenly. Despite the ups and downs, Dr. Nick had fond memories of Elvis. He remembered the time Elvis got mad and fired an arm in the house. Vernon had just come home from the hospital after a heart attack, and the chaos nearly sent him back. One bullet even burned across Dr. Nick's chest. Elvis felt worse about it than anyone. "Not as scared as Elvis was," Dr. Nick said, laughing at the memory. Life on the road came with its own laughs, too. One prank involved red dye placed in a candy bar. When the victim went to the bathroom, he thought he was bleeding. Everyone had a good laugh, though it scared the poor man. Dr. Nick also recalled New Year's Eve, 1975, in Pontiac. Elvis was nervous about his throat. It was freezing cold, and he feared the weather would ruin his voice. Elvis insisted on flying in his throat specialist from Las Vegas. Dr. Nick had a friend pretend to be the doctor and checked Elvis himself. The king never knew the truth. Dr. Nick often said Elvis was generous to a fault. If someone complimented his watch, he'd take it off and give it away. If a stranger on the street admired his car, Elvis might just hand them the keys. It wasn't about showing off. That's just how he was, generous and kind, even when things were falling apart. But behind that kindness, Dr. Nick saw how fragile Elvis had become. Though the world saw a superstar, Dr. Nick saw a man who couldn't sleep, couldn't digest food properly, and couldn't go a day without pain. Still, he tried to protect him. Dr. Nick recalled several times when he had to throw out treatments Elvis got from somewhere else. Some were sent in secret packages, others were given by friends who thought they were helping. The challenge wasn't just the bad usage, it was the people. Elvis was surrounded by what Dr. Nick called the team. Around 150 people moved with him: family, friends, security, and assistants. Each had a role to play, but not all cared about his well-being. Some enabled the habits, others just stood by. Aside from that, there were still people in Vegas and Los Angeles, the so-called feel-good doctors. They gave Elvis whatever he asked for. Dr. Nick couldn't track it all. The struggle became harder every day. Elvis wanted to be in control, but sometimes control meant self-destruction. "It's funny," Dr. Nick once said, "how one small misunderstanding could change everything. One man on the team got himself a car and a paycheck without telling the others. Someone told Elvis and he felt betrayed. That's all it took." Despite all the troubles, Dr. Nick never gave up. He made 5 house calls a week to Graceland, often for free. He worked long hours, often putting his own family and medical practice at risk. He was there when Elvis needed to talk, to vent, or just sit in silence. Still, the media painted a different picture when pointing fingers. The physician who became a target. When Elvis passed on, fingers pointed. Rumors spread fast. Dr. Nick, once a trusted friend and physician, became a target. In 1980, he was charged with overprescribing not just to Elvis, but to other patients too. Though he was cleared of criminal charges, the damage was done. His license was suspended for 3 months. 15 years later, it was taken away for good. They always needed a scapegoat, he said, and I was the one closest to him. People forget that in the 70s, healthcare was different. There were no sleep clinics or pain management centers. Dr. Nick had to travel with a suitcase full of treatment not just for Elvis, but for everyone on tour. He planned ahead, even checking with health departments in each city for flu outbreaks. So why were all the treatments labeled for Elvis? Simple. Vernon Presley. If Elvis's father thought the prescriptions were for others, he'd ask too many questions. Labeling them under Elvis kept things moving. Dr. Nick later tried to defend himself in court and in the media. He said he asked pharmaceutical companies to make harmless placebo treatment for Elvis, but they refused. He even tried to make his own by replacing them with sugar. None of it seemed to help when the accusations came. After he lost his license, Dr. Nick's life changed. No longer a practicing doctor, he sold off personal memorabilia. Items Elvis had given him, watches, jewelry, books, went to auction. Not because he wanted to profit, but because he had no other choice. One of those auctions took place just a day after Michael Jackson passed. Strange timing, considering both stars were tied to the same experiences. But Dr. Nick never stopped defending himself. I never charged Elvis for a house call, he said, and I don't regret the medications I gave. They were needed. His biggest regret wasn't what he did, but how the world responded. He felt misunderstood, judged by people who didn't know the full story. And in many ways, maybe no one ever truly did. The world cried. The headlines said excess. The fans blamed usage, while the media blamed Dr. Nick. But according to the doctor, the truth was more painful and far more complicated. Elvis didn't pass away from usage alone, Dr. Nick said firmly. He passed on because his body gave up. That megacolon condition had reached a breaking point. The pressure in Elvis's gut became too much. It affected his blood flow, his breathing, and most of all, his heart. Dr. Nick believed that Elvis suffered a heart attack caused by a mix of medical conditions, not just medication. Elvis could have been saved, Dr. Nick said, shaking his head, but only if the world had let him rest. People wanted the king, but the man behind the king was falling apart. And here's the twist. Dr. Nick stayed quiet for a long time. For years, he didn't speak out. He faced court cases. He lost his medical license for a time. He was blamed in the news. People called him careless, greedy, even dangerous. But through it all, he never spoke badly about Elvis. I kept his secrets because he trusted me, Dr. Nick said. Even when others made money writing books, Dr. Nick stayed silent. Even when he could have defended himself by blaming Elvis, he refused. He stayed loyal to the end. But as he got older, closer to 100, Dr. Nick knew the truth had to come out. I want people to understand, he said. Elvis didn't want to pass away. He was trying to get better, but the machine around him was too strong. He wasn't talking about a robot. He meant the business machine, the tours, the money, the fame, the expectations. Once it started rolling, it didn't stop. Not for a man's health, not even for Elvis. Dr. Nick's voice cracked near the end of the interview. He was scared, he said softly. He told me once, "Doc, I don't think I'll wake up tomorrow." And that night, he didn't. Dr. Nick never wanted fame. He didn't want to be remembered as the doctor who gave Elvis all of those. He wanted to be remembered as the man who tried to help. And in that quiet 2007 interview, just 9 years before his passing, he finally gave the world the truth he had carried for decades. Elvis wasn't careless. He wasn't weak. He was tired. His body was breaking. And no one, not even the people closest to him, could stop what was coming. Dr. Nick held on to those memories. The good, the bad, and everything in between. Through it all, he believed he tried his best. Even as the world changed its opinion, he stood by the choices he made. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only way he knew how to keep the king standing tall for as long as he did. What do you think about how Dr. Nick was treated? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.